Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Backwoods Solar YouTube video. In today's YouTube video, we're going to be covering the most common reasons for your inverter system to not connect or not stay connected to either your generator or grid source. Stay tuned. I just wanted to mention before we get started today that while this video will be featuring Victron and Victron inverters, the principles here can be applied to other inverter systems. You will just be accessing that data in a different way than will be featured here for Victron equipment. The first point of reference on Victron inverters will be the LED indicators on the faces of the inverter units. In this case here, we have a split phase system, and you can see that they just switched to grid or grid connection and began charging, or in this case went to float as the batteries were full. But this is the first data point to observe is what does the inverter think it's doing and what state does it think it's in. On most Victron inverter systems, once there is AC power present, you will see the mains on light blinking. This indicates while there is power, the inverter is either qualifying or the power is outside of its accepted range. If you have a generator no connection condition, then the next step here is to jump into Victron Connect and see what the inverter sees. If your inverter system does not display this data, then the only way to glean this would be to use a multimeter, because specifically here we're going to be looking at the voltage and the frequency of the power coming into the inverter system. Quality of power is usually the number one reason for inverter no connect. So this is certainly the first thing to check is what is the voltage and what is the frequency of the power coming in to the inverter. You can see here on the left that Victron inverters do actively report if they're connected or disconnected from the grid. And if they are disconnected, it'll report the reason why. This inverter system is a little unique in that it's a 240 volt with a 120 volt input. So you can see that L2 shows disconnected even though L1 is connected. And here we went back to inverting with both inputs disconnected. And we're going to simulate a connection to a grid or generator now. If you keep your eye on the right-hand pane, you can see when the AC input is actively connected and when it's going through its qualification process. If the inverter does ignore the power or doesn't accept the power for some reason, it will report that there in the pane. And as you can see, L2 is disconnected as it doesn't see input power in this case. And there you can see it actively grab on the L1 phase and start charging and passing through. In this case, we went right to float. The next most common problem we see is the inverter connecting to the source, but after some time dropping or disconnecting from the source. This is most commonly caused by the inverter trying to demand too much power from the generator or input source. The easiest way to solve this is to set an appropriate input current limit. This can be quickly adjusted on the overview screen by hitting the A icon and then setting the appropriate current limit there. These can also be set individually for each inverter by going up to the gear icon, clicking on that, entering our password, which is always ZZZ, and then we're presented with each inverter where we can set the input limit separately. It's pretty rare that you set these different, but in case you did, you do have that option. The next thing to check if you have an active disconnection is maybe the inverter's told not to connect for some reason. In the Victron systems, we can check it by going up to the gear icon, clicking on the specific inverter, and then going into the AC input control tab. This top slider here controls whether or not the inverter is looking for a conditional function for connecting to AC. You can see below there that you have a few options on connection and disconnection. These include the load, the state of charge, the voltage, and then the reason for disconnection such as bulk finish, absorption finish, etc. The last behavior you may see in an inverter system is an instantaneous connect and disconnect, essentially a click-click. This behavior, at least in Victron inverter systems, is almost always representative of a bad neutral to earth connection or some kind of grounding problem in general. The first thing to try when diagnosing this is to disconnect the ground wire that's running out to your generator. Of course, this is not the safe thing to do long term, but as a troubleshooting or diagnostic tool, it's usually the first thing I recommend. And here what you're really looking for is any change in behavior to may help point you in the direction of where the trouble is. These types of grounding problems can be difficult to diagnose, so you're always welcome to give us a call and talk with one of our techs. Otherwise, if you had any other additional questions, you can leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next one.
Backwoods Solar is America's oldest and most trusted solar retailer with nearly 50 years of experience. Head over to our website, backwoodssolar.com, to get a free copy of our planning guide. While you're there, check out our Learning Center with articles on setup, sizing, tax credits, and so much more helpful information, especially if you're just getting started with solar. There are also links provided in the description.